Imagine this. You wake up one morning and something feels off. The air is thick with an unnameable tension. You check your phone, dozens of notifications, a flood of headlines about crises, conflicts, and collapsing systems. You scroll past curated lives on social media, each one a polished performance of happiness. And yet, beneath it all, you sense it, a quiet, gnawing unease. You get ready for work, moving through the motions like a sleepwalker. The commute is a blur of exhausted faces, people staring at screens, lost in private worlds of distraction. At the office, you exchange hollow pleasantries, perform tasks that feel meaningless, and suppress the growing sense that something is deeply wrong. Not just with you, but with everything. By evening, you're drained. You try to relax, but your mind won't stop racing. You think about the future climate collapse, economic instability, political chaos, and feel a knot in your stomach. You think about your own life relationships that feel shallow, ambitions that no longer excite you, a lingering sense of being trapped. And then the question rises, unbidden. Is this normal? Or is this the constant anxiety, the numbness, the feeling of being stretched thin between impossible demands, something far darker? And here's the paradox. We live in the most technologically advanced, medically sophisticated, and materially abundant era in human history. And yet mental illness is skyrocketing. Depression, anxiety, ADHD, addiction, and chronic stress are not just personal struggles, they are epidemics. The World Health Organization warns that depression is now the leading cause of disability worldwide. Suicide rates climb. Burnout is the new baseline. Therapy and medication help, but they don't solve the deeper problem. So we must ask, why? Is it just bad brain chemistry? Genetic predisposition? Is personal weakness? Or is something far more sinister at work? The uncomfortable truth, what if mental illness isn't just an individual malfunction, but a logical response to an insane world? Think about it. We evolved in small, tight-knit tribes where survival depended on community, movement, and purpose. Now, we live in a world of artificial isolation, sedentary confinement, and soul-crushing bureaucracy. We're bombarded with information, but starved of wisdom. We're connected, yet lonelier than ever. We chase wealth, status, and pleasure only to find them hollow. And when we break under the weight of it all, we're told the problem is us. Take anxiety. Is it really a disorder or a rational reaction to a world of uncertainty, where jobs vanish overnight, relationships are disposable, and the future feels like a cliff edge? Take depression. Is it a chemical imbalance or the soul's protest against a life stripped of meaning? Take ADHD. Is it a neurological defect or a brain rebelling against an unnatural world of endless distractions? Shallow tasks and fractured attention? So here it is, the question that changes everything. What if society itself is the disease? And if so, how do we break free? The modern world was not designed for human flourishing. It was built for efficiency, productivity, and control. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is the inevitable outcome of systems that prioritize profit over people, speed over depth, and conformity over authenticity. To understand why society breeds mental illness, we must trace the psychological and philosophical roots of this sickness, because what we call mental disorders are often the mind's last stand against an inhuman way of living. Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, "Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, it is the rule." Civilization, for all its progress, has always demanded repression. Sigmund Freud called it the discontent. Inherent in modern life, the trade-off where we sacrifice primal instincts for the sake of order. But today, that repression has reached a breaking point. We are expected to sit still for 8 to 12 hours a day in artificial environments, suppress natural emotions to fit into professional and social molds, live as isolated economic units rather than as interdependent members of a tribe. The result? Society where chronic stress is the norm, where emotional numbness is mistaken for stability, and where the most functional people are often the most deeply broken because they have learned to silence their own pain. Carl Jung saw the danger early. Neuroses is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, mental illness is not just chemical, it is existential. When we are forced to live inauthentically, the psyche rebels. Consider the false promise of individualism. We are told we are free, yet we are trapped in a maze of debt, social expectations, and algorithmic manipulation. We perform curated identities online, while our true selves atrophy. The tyranny of positivity. Negative emotions are pathologized. Grief, anger, and doubt are treated as disorders rather than natural responses to a fractured world. The commodification of desire. Advertising and social media hijack our dopamine systems, making us addicted to consumption while eroding our capacity for real fulfillment. This is not an accident. As philosopher Byung-Chul Han argues, in the burnout society, we have moved from a society of repression to one of self-exploitation, where we willingly grind ourselves into exhaustion, believing it is our fault if we cannot keep up. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust and founder of logotherapy, observed that the primary driver of mental illness in modernity is the existential vacuum, the absence of meaning. Traditional societies had rituals, myths, and shared beliefs that anchored people in something larger than themselves. Today, we have consumerism, a hollow religion that promises fulfillment through possessions. Digital nihilism, endless scrolling, a paralysis of choice, and the erosion of deep attention. The cult of productivity, where your worth is measured by output, not humanity. Without a transcendent purpose, the mind turns inward and begins to devour itself. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Hell is other people." But perhaps the deeper truth is that hell is a society that denies human nature. Arthur Schopenhauer saw suffering as intrinsic to existence. But modern capitalism has perfected a new kind of suffering, one that is avoidable, yet so pervasive we mistake it for fate. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World predicted it best: people would not be controlled through force, but through pleasure, distraction, and the illusion of freedom. And when the oppression is soft, the chains are invisible. We are now at a crossroads. The rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide are not statistical anomalies. They are symptoms of a deeper collapse. The question is no longer what's wrong with me, but what's wrong with the world that so many of us are breaking? And if society is the disease, what then is the cure? The mind adapts to survive in when the environment is hostile. This is why so many symptoms of mental illness are not true malfunctions, but survival mechanisms in a world that has turned against human nature. The anxiety that keeps you awake at night, a heightened state of vigilance in a society that feels unstable. The depression that drains your will, protective shutdown when meaning is stripped away. The ADHD brain's refusal to focus, rebellion against an attention economy designed to fracture consciousness. But adaptation comes at a cost. The consequences, both personal and societal, are far darker than we realize. The rise of the fragmented self. Carl Jung warned of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we disown to fit into society. But today, the fragmentation goes deeper. The digital doppelganger. Social media forces us to split into the performer and the observer. The more curated the exterior, the emptier the interior becomes. The professional mask work demands a version of you that is efficient, agreeable, and emotionally neutered. Over time, you forget who you were before the mask. The consumer identity. You are what you buy, what you wear, what you stream. Identity becomes a collage of brands rather than an authentic self. The result? A generation suffering from chronic self-alienation, a form of psychological homelessness where no inner space feels real anymore. The neurological betrayal. Modern life is hijacking our biology. Dopamine, slavery, every notification, every like, every viral outrage is engineered to trigger addictive dopamine spikes. Over time, the brain loses its ability to derive pleasure from slower, deeper rewards, like reading a book, having a real conversation, or simply sitting in stillness. The stress epidemic. The body's fight-or-flight system was designed for acute danger. It was never meant to handle chronic stressors. Debt, social media comparison, job insecurity. The result? Baseline state of hypervigilance that erodes physical and mental health. Sleep as the new luxury. Blue light, 24/7 connectivity, and anxiety have turned sleep, a biological necessity, into a privilege. Sleep deprivation then exacerbates every other mental health issue in a vicious cycle. We are not weak. We are overmatched by systems that exploit our neurology. The social collapse. Mental illness is not just personal, it ripples outward, eroding the fabric of society itself. The loneliness epidemic. We have more connections than ever, yet genuine community is vanishing. Studies show loneliness is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The death of trust. Paranoia spreads when institutions fail us, when algorithms profit from outrage, and when every interaction feels transactional. A society without trust is a society on the brink of breakdown. The creativity crisis, mental exhaustion, and fear of failure have led to a decline in creative risk-taking. Art, innovation, and cultural vitality suffer when the mind is trapped in survival mode. This is not evolution, it is regression. Sick society produces sick individuals who then reinforce the sickness in a self-perpetuating loop. The illusion of treatment. Here's the cruelest twist. Many solutions only deepen the problem. Medication as a stopgap. Antidepressants and anxiolytics can be life-saving, but they often treat symptoms while ignoring the root cause, a way of life at odds with human needs. Therapy in a vacuum. Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches coping skills, but it cannot answer the existential question. Why should I cope with a life that feels meaningless? Self-help as self-optimization. The wellness industry sells fixes that turn healing into another form of productivity. Meditate to be more efficient. Journal to hack your mindset. Even recovery becomes another task to master. We are treating wounds while still embedded in the machinery that creates them, the invisible prison. And the most dangerous cages are the ones we don't see. You wake up, work, consume, distract, repeat, and if you complain, you're told you're too sensitive, or worse, mentally ill. But what if the opposite is true? What if the so-called disordered are the canaries in the coal mine, the ones who refuse to adapt to a pathological system? The French philosopher Michel Foucault argued that madness is not an absolute condition, but a social construct, a label used to silence those who deviate from the norm. So we must ask, who benefits from a society where exhaustion is normal, anxiety is expected, and despair is medicated rather than examined? The answer will lead us to the only real way out. There is a way out, but it is not the one you've been sold. It will not come from a pill, a productivity hack, or a self-help guru promising enlightenment in 30 days. The true escape demands something far more radical, a conscious rejection of the systems that have made us sick. This is not about individual recovery. It is about collective insurrection against a way of life that was never designed for human thriving. The awakening, seeing the cage. Before you can break free, you must recognize the bars, question the defaults. Why do we accept 40-hour work weeks as inevitable? Why do we equate wealth with worth? Why do we tolerate lives spent in fluorescent lit boxes, chasing promotions that leave us emptier than before? These are not natural laws, they are choices, and they can be unchosen. Reject the pathology narrative. Your depression is not a defect. Your anxiety is not a malfunction. They are signals of psyche screaming that something in your life is unsustainable. Start listening. Embrace existential responsibility, Viktor Frankl wrote. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Society will try to shrink that space with distractions and urgency. Your first act of rebellion is to reclaim it. Withdrawal, detoxing from the machine. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. Digital asceticism. The attention economy is a war for your soul. Delete the apps that fragment your mind. Turn off notifications. Let your brain remember what deep focus feels like. The anti-productivity revolution. Stop glorifying busyness. The Italian Marxist Franco Berardi warns that the acceleration of infostimuli has made thinking impossible. Slow down. Waste time purposefully. Let your worth be separate from your output. Rewilding the self. Spend time in nature where there are no algorithms, no performance reviews, no curated identities. Let your nervous system remember its natural rhythm. The reclamation. Building a human life. Now comes the dangerous part. creating a way of living that society will call irrational. Tribalism over individualism. Humans need bonds that are not transactional. Find your people, those who see through the illusion and build real community. As the anarchist thinker David Graeber argued, the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make, could just as easily make differently, meaning as resistance. Nietzsche's amor fati was not passive acceptance, but active creation of meaning in a meaningless world. Start projects that matter only to you. Create art that will never be monetized. Worship something that cannot be measured, the sacred ordinary. Philosopher Albert Camus found revolt in simple beauty. In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. Rediscover the sacred in a morning coffee, a walk without headphones, a conversation that goes nowhere and everywhere. The dangerous truth: they don't want you to know the system survives because we believe we need it. But what if the so-called real world, the one of 9-to-5 drudgery, soul-crushing debt, and performative happiness, is the actual delusion? What if the mentally ill are simply those who can no longer pretend? History's greatest emancipations began when people realized their chains were psychological. The abolitionists didn't argue for better slavery. The suffragettes didn't lobby for kinder patriarchy. They rejected the entire premise. Your liberation starts when you realize you do not have to live like this. You do not have to want what they've told you to want. Your madness might be the beginning of your sanity. Know the choice. There are two paths now. One, continue adapting, keep numbing, optimizing, and pretending until your soul is a ghost in the machine. Start dismantling. Begin the lifelong work of unlearning, refusing, and building something truer. The first will make you functional. The second will make you free. The greatest lie society ever told you was that you were broken. But the truth is far more unsettling. You were never the problem. The anxiety, the depression, the sense of emptiness, these were not personal failings, but the inevitable consequences of living in a world fundamentally at odds with human nature. And here is the final, most dangerous realization. Mental illness is not your pathology, is your protest. Asterisk, the rebellion of the soul. Your mind has been trying to save you all along. Depression is not weakness. It is the body's refusal to participate in a meaningless grind. Anxiety is not irrational. It is the psyche's alarm bell in a world of perpetual uncertainty. ADHD is not a disorder. It is a cognitive style incompatible with artificial focus demands. The so-called symptoms were never malfunctions. They were signals, desperate attempts by your deepest self to warn you that something is terribly wrong. The radical reframe: what if we've been diagnosing the wrong patient? We pathologize individuals while ignoring the sickness of the system itself. Consider, a fish gasping on land is not disordered. It is in the wrong environment. A plant wilting in darkness is not defective. It is starved of sunlight. You are not ill. You are mismatched, a human being trapped in a world that no longer serves humanity. The fork in the road: now that you see the truth, there are only two options. Reassimilate. Return to the numbness. Accept the antidepressants without questioning why so many need them. Keep pretending the problem is you live dangerous. Accept that you may never fit in, and that this is your greatest strength. Build pockets of sanity in an insane world. Become a quiet revolutionary of the everyday. The new resistance, your healing begins where obedience ends. Create meaning anyway, even if the world calls it impractical. Prioritize joy anyway, even if it's not monetizable. Connect deeply anyway, even in a culture of surfaces. This is how you win. Not by fixing yourself to fit the world, but by living so authentically that the world must adjust to you. The final truth, the most subversive thing you can do, is to become whole in a fractured world. When you stop pathologizing your pain and start listening to it, when you refuse to medicate away your legitimate grief over an illegitimate way of living, you commit the ultimate act of rebellion. You declare through your very existence, this is not normal. This is not inevitable. This is not the only way. And in that declaration, you become something dangerous, something the system cannot control. A human being who cannot be tamed,